back, listeners, to the BizBlend Podcast, where business meets mindset, performance and transformation, and strategy meets soul. Now, today's episode, it's for every founder who has ever felt stuck in their own head. Maybe when strategy isn't enough and they kind of feel demotivated. They feel like motivation is out of reach. Now, listeners, I'm thrilled to welcome Karina Baldwin, a powerhouse mental performance coach with a master's in performance psychology. Now, from training Division 1 athletes to working with soldiers in the US Army and now coaching female founders to run their business from a place of logic, not emotional overload. Karina brings elite mental training to the boardroom. So, in this episode, we'll talk about practical ways to spark that momentum that you need when you feel unmotivated, or how your thoughts, how they determine your ceiling, and why it is time that we treat business owners like the elite performers they are. So, with that, let's quickly dive in. So, Karina, welcome to the show, and it is an honor to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's going to be such a fun conversation. I already know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you have trained elite athletes and soldiers. That's like the battleground, the warrior mindset. So, what's the biggest mental block you think, Karina, which high performers share? I mean, which is there in common, and how does that show up in entrepreneurs?
I think I see the biggest impact or like the biggest obstacle that a lot of high performers, elite athletes, the soldiers that I used to work with was the realization that they actually have control over their own reality. I think a lot of people go through their lives believing that things happen to them, right? Kind of like if you've ever heard the saying, the tail wags the dog instead of the dog wags the tail, right? So like they kind of feel like their circumstances in life are creating the reality that they have. But in fact, tons of research shows that we can create our own reality, and I think a lot of people, when they first hear that, they're like, yeah, but I was born into a specific, socioeconomic household. Yeah, but I don't have a college degree. Yeah, but whatever it is, fill in the blank, fill in the excuse, fill in the thing. And I want to say, in the most powerful way, you are the reason that you have the results in your life. And by that, let it also be known that you are also the reason that you can have success. You can get past these obstacles. Obviously, I understand there's a level of privilege that there's some people that are like born into certain families that they're given some resources that others are not. But at the same time, realization that you have complete control over the actions that you take, that is the biggest thing that sets apart elite performers from the average person. The average person accepts their reality as like, well, shrug my shoulders, this is my life. But elite performers know that they can change the results that they currently have. They can run faster, they can make more sales, they can be more logical, they can change their current reality into something that is going to serve them in a way that they want. So I see that like the acceptance of your current reality is the biggest barrier and the biggest obstacle that I see people have before they become the elite performer.
Hmm. That definitely makes sense. I agree with you. And what I believe, it's not only the actions, but the decisions as well. Sometimes the decisions we take, um, if we are kind of held up into that anxiety or fear, then they could really change the course of events, the way we react as well. So I absolutely agree with you, Karina. Now, I've also seen founders, kind of freeze right when things start to succeed. Uh,
Yeah.
is that the same performance anxiety you may have witnessed in sports or the military?
Yeah, it's the inability for the brain to, like, process the possibility of success, right? Because with success means there's new pressures, right? I think a lot of people, they don't wanna believe that their brain is fearful of success, but unfortunately, like, it is something that happens in the brain, right? It's kind of like the survival mode kicks in, and success to the ego part of the brain, the caveman part of the brain, the primitive part of the brain, whatever you want to call it, success means I have to keep doing this. I have to keep holding myself to the standard, and that I'm gonna be in a spotlight that I haven't been in before. And the
Mhm.
reality of the primitive brain is we are here for survival, right? Yeah, we're no longer running from saber-tooth tigers like the caveman days were, right? But we're running from financial success. We're running from, ostracization. We're running from embarrassment or failure, right? Those things still exist in this day and age. And a level of success of like, oh, I, successfully launched my product and it sold out. Okay, well, now the public, quote unquote, is expecting you to do it again and again and again. That's scary to be held to this high standard, right? We want to put it into the sport. I love obviously working with in athletic departments and athletic leagues, something to that degree of like, look at the track record of the Patriots in the past, maybe like 5, 6 years ago when they had Tom Brady. They had like Tom Brady had 7 Super Bowls, I wanna say, under his belt with the Patriots, and that expectation, that level of success was unheard of, right? That he was one of the most winningest football players of all time, and same with bringing the Patriots along for that, leading that team into that success. And so it creates a sense of pressure of now they're expected to give everyone a run for their money. They are expected to show up and play a Super Bowl every year. They're expected if they go to a Super Bowl to win the Super Bowl. That
Mhm.
pressure just gets added again and again and again every single time that, like, a level of success happens, and that's scary. That's a scary thing that, like, you're no longer being asked to just, like, do your best, have fun, right? You are expected to win and be the best of the best. So success and that freeze, that's coming from our caveman brain. That's coming from our primitive brain on quite literally a survival level, that success
Mhm.
is a scary thing.
It is. It is. Ah, and let me put a bit of a flip side perspective here, Karina. Some people say that you just need discipline, consistency, not psychology. That all this mindset stuff is, fluff. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I love that question. I honestly love skepticism. I think that there's also a difference between skepticism and closed-mindedness. I
Mm-hmm.
think I whenever I work with clients, whenever I work with female founders, I always tell them, like, bring your skepticism, bring in any questions. If you're like, "Hey, I don't think that's gonna work for me," give me that question, ask that question, because we need to question. If we just outright expect, or outright accept everything that's given to us from a quote unquote expert, regardless of what that expert has their education in, then like we become mindless, just like copies of each other, right? So we need to question things. So I love the skepticism that like, oh, psychology is like not actually helpful. The definition of psychology is the understanding of relationships. And there are 3 relationships in business. 1, the relationship between you and your client. 2, the relationship between you and your team. And then 3, the relationship between you and yourself. And yes, to a degree, absolutely, discipline is the reason that a lot of business owners are as successful as they are. And what I would question, what I would challenge the thought of psychology isn't necessary, but I would say, what relationship does discipline fall under? Right. And if you think about that, discipline falls under the relationship between you and yourself. Right. We all know the people that don't have discipline. that they are first to flake out on plans. They're the first to not follow through with their
Mm,
actions that they say. They don't have as strong of a trust relationship with themselves, right? So, in order to build a sense of discipline, you have to
mhm,
trust the follow through that you're going to follow through, right? How you develop discipline is creating a strong relationship with the statement of like, if I say I'm gonna wake up at 7 a.m., the
mhm,
next day when you wake up at 7 a.m. and you do it, you're just putting money in that relationship bank, in that trust bank, right?
mhm,
Same
mhm.
thing with your clients. If you were to tell all of your clients, oh, I'm hosting this webinar at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, and then you don't show up, you just broke trust with your clients. You just
Exactly.
broke, yeah. So I would challenge them that, like, don't get me wrong, there's a ton of people out there in the world, unfortunately, that, cross their fingers, say something, and, like, spin in circles 3 times and it's gonna come true because you said it into the world. Those mindset people don't have the resources or don't have the credibility necessarily that can give you real science-backed, theories that can prove things to be true. But I would challenge the statement of all you need is discipline and commitment. You don't need psychology. I challenge it that psychology is the only thing that you need. You need to understand the deeper relationship between you and your client, you and your team, and you and yourself. And if you can understand the relationship in each of those three categories, you can master a business.
I agree. I agree. And as we talk about psychology, Karina, and you since you work with women founders now, the context changes a bit. Because of there can be intrinsic factors, um, cultural factors, upbringing related factors. When especially women, they are kind of assumed to be organically take everything on their plate and just cruise through or sort
Yeah.
things out. So what would you say in this context, because sometimes the burden of everything can really break that discipline consistency down to the core.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as females, particularly if you take on the role of motherhood as well, you're expected to hold so much weight on your shoulders. You are expected by societal norms to be good at your job and be a good mother and be at home and perform in the boardroom and don't forget to work out and don't forget to go to therapy and don't forget to have margaritas with your friends on Tuesday. There's so many societal pressures that are put on women in this day and age, particularly in like the capitalistic cultures that we have.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that performance psychology can do is I wanna say that there's no such thing, this is with an asterisk, there is no such thing as a work-life balance. The reality of the human brain is we can only focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So that means that there are gonna be times that family comes second. But that also means that there are gonna be time that business comes second, that family comes first, that being with friends, Margarita Tuesday, that you are present with your friends. And so something that I work with all of my clients on is, yeah, you can like zoom out and essentially it's time management, but really it's figuring out where your priorities are in your life and what's going to serve you best. Because there are going to be times that family needs to be the only thing on your brain. And then there are other times where you're like, "Hey fam, I need you to like I'm going to close the door and I need 2 hours of uninterrupted time. And if I get these 2 hours of uninterrupted time, I can spend all evening with kiddos and partner and friends and family because I got my work done." And it's prioritizing the right thing at the right time. So instead of half in, half out, where we have a baby on our hip and a screaming toddler in the background and we're trying to work, but instead, are there times where we could ask a family member, ask a friend, hire a nanny for 2 hours to get focused, intentional work, and then be like, "Thank you, nanny, for your time. That was super easy. $50 out of the way." Or the teenager down the street, if you have, toddlers that you can trust with the teenager down the street.
Mhm.
Um, and being able to actually be like, "Okay, I got my 2 hours of work done. Now it's time to give all of my attention to my family. Give all of my attention and prioritize them now." Right? So it's prioritizing and scheduling the right things at the right time, so your attention is going to the right things at the right time.
True. True. Hmm. Yeah. It can be overwhelming, but it is possible. It is
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like, empowering that everyone can do it, and while you're seemingly drowning, it
Mm.
seems really scary and it seems really hard. It seems like, "Well, I can't afford that. I don't have anyone in my corner. I don't know how I'm gonna get childcare. My partner is at work. They're the breadwinner right now because I'm at home with the kids, but how can I still build my business?" There are other strategies that we can figure out of, like, maybe it's time during nap time that, like, okay, this 30 minutes, hour that I know that baby will be asleep, I
Mhm.
get in and I focus on the needle moving action. The one thing, is it cold outreach? Is it invoicing clients? That that most basic level of business is getting new clients in and or reoccurring clients, sales coming in, revenue coming in. How can we make sure that we're prioritizing those things and serving when we can, right? But finding little bits and pieces of time throughout the day, we can figure out how to make yourself run your business and still be present with family at home.
True. True. And let's also talk about some of the solutions out there, Karina. So, any tangible mental skills or routines you recommend for sparking or reigniting that motivation, especially during emotional overwhelm or maybe burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. I love analogies. I'm a queen of analogies. I think they really help show the brain and are able to, like, tangibly give everyone, "Oh, that makes sense." An analogy that really helps, particularly in the idea of burnout,
Mhm.
is your energy levels are like water in a bathtub, right? So there are two ways that we can kind of rejuvenate
Mm.
ourselves is one, we can plug the drain, right? And then two is we can turn on the faucet. And there are huge differences between the two. So, what it may look like is self soothing versus self care. I think a lot of times there are a lot of actions that are self soothing that a lot of people misconstrue as self care. Those are the ideas of, like, oh, I need to scroll on Instagram, or I need to watch Netflix, or I need to take a bubble bath. All of those things are self soothing. They stop the water from going out of the bathtub, right? They plug the drain. But self-care is like
Mm.
going to the gym, eating healthy, hanging out with people that fill your cup, your friends, your family, your partner, maybe your kids, right? Like, w we need to see the difference. We need to make sure there are times that each self-soothing and self-care are taken care of. When you are in burnout, your bathtub water is, like, down to your last, like, 3 inches. It is barely enough to cover your feet in the tub if you stepped into it, right? You are drained. But if you don't plug the drain and turn on the faucet, the water's not gonna fill back up. If we only turn on the faucet and we don't plug the drain, it's gonna take forever for us to fill it back up. If we just simply overload ourselves with gym time and healthy food. And then it takes more of our time to plan all of our meals and more of our time to plan hang out with friends. It's just adding more to our plate that, like, it's starting to fill our cup, but the water is still being drained from the tub, right? So
Mm.
we need to also be able to check out, stop the tub from draining by doing some of those self soothing. Can you just simply sit and be? Can you just simply exist in the world without having to turn on the brain, without having to work super hard? Is it the bathtub? Is it the glass of wine? Is it the Netflix? Is it the, scrolling on Instagram? All we're doing is pressing pause. First,
Mm.
we press pause, then we turn on the faucet and add some of those "this is what fills my cup" action. Because a lot of the time, when people are burnt out, it's
Yeah,
truly not because they're doing too much, it's because they're not doing enough of the things that fill them up, right?
exact. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that, like, identifying the difference for you, this is a tangible skill. Identifying the difference. What is your self-soothing actions and your self-care actions? Because it's different for everybody. Some of it, if you're like, listen to all those things that I listed off, amazing. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's what I do. Great. Do them. But they can be different from person to person. Some people may go for walks. Some people are like, I want to go run a marathon. Some people are, like, oh, I need to go to the plant store. Amazing. Do that. But we need to figure out first what's the self soothing versus what is the self care. Identify that difference and make sure
Mm.
you have a balance of having each of them in your life.
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
you mentioned about this, burnout is not because of we are doing too much, but we are doing something that is not enough to fill us. I think this is so so true. Personally, if I talk with respect to the changes, the kind of pivots I made in the last 2 to 3 years, even if right now I may be, waking up or doing late nights every day, it's
Yeah.
like we like being awake till 4 or 5 in the morning, doing continuous shows, back to back shows, working on editing, marketing stuff. However, it is still something which is soulfully aligned. I enjoy
Yeah.
doing this. So even if I'm physically feeling probably like, okay, I should, just get sleep, I feel like sleeping. But the next podcast I'm just sitting in, I again get some kind of energy. Okay, this is something really great. Let's do this. And that tiredness somehow it goes away.
Yeah. There's something that lights you up inside when you're doing something that you love. And doing
Yeah.
more of it will continue to, like, that's the filling, turning on the faucet, filling in the bathtub, and is so
Mm,
necessary for you to find and enjoy aspects of your life, right? Because the purpose of us being here on earth is not to work. It's not to, sit there and punch the clock. It's to enjoy the opportunity of being here on earth while we are here on earth, right? So we might as well do something that we love because time will pass anyway. So enjoy the time that you have, fill it with the activities that you love, and if you can create a business based on those activities, hell yeah,
mm,
let's do it, right?
yeah, yeah, true. Great, great, Karina. So before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Absolutely. You can head over to my Instagram at True Adventure Co. That's the best way, quickest way to get a hold of me. Shoot me a DM. I would love to continue to have conversations. If anything that sparked your interest here on this conversation, I would love to have some more questions asking in the DMs and the messages. That would be so much fun. You can also find me on my website at trueadventurecollective.com. And then I also have my own podcast where we just simply talk about how performance psychology can help you in the business world. And it's the True Adventure Podcast. And you can find that anywhere that you stream podcasts. So those are the three places that I hang out the most: Instagram at True Adventure Co., website, trueadventurecollective.com, and then the podcast world, True Adventure Podcast. So that's how you can connect with me for sure. And I'd love to continue. And I will always nerd out about psychology and how it affects business and the three relationships that you have in the business world. It's always just such a fun conversation that I will never stop talking about.
I know that. I can get that, vibe here.
Yeah.
So superb, Karina. I mean, this was a masterclass in mental performance, and yeah, motivation isn't magic. Um, rather we see so much of kind of this false optimism or positivity. I think motivation isn't magic. Mindset isn't optional. So for anyone listening to this conversation who wants to build a multi-dollar, million-dollar business or anything, without battling their brain every step of the way, I think this conversation is definitely the start line, the line to start
Yeah.
your journey. So thank you so much, Karina, for this.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, so listeners, if you found value in this episode, make sure to follow Karina, check out her work, listen to her podcast. I'll have all the links in the show notes. And until next time, keep blending brilliance with mindset. Thank you.